It's really good to have you, man. I think we should open up with this recent comment. Well, more than a comment. I guess it was like a 60 to 90-second clip by Vitalik Buterin, founder of the Ethereum project, that basically said, you know, they've gone through this merge, this shift to proof of stake and away from proof of work. And he made this very telling comment about that, which I'll just throw over to you. What were your, first of all, what did he say? And then what were your impressions about that, in terms of how it's been influential on what you are working on?
So in terms of what did he say, I think this is a good place just for your editor to just flat out edit that exact clip in.
So I think like to summarize, one of the ways that I think about this in a more philosophical way is like proof of work is based on the laws of physics, and so you sort of have to work with the world as it is, right? You have to work with, you know, electricity as it is, hardware as it is, what computers are as it is. Whereas because proof of stake is virtualized in this way, it's basically letting us create a simulated universe that has its own laws of physics, and that just gives us as protocol developers a lot more freedom to optimize the system around actually having all of the different security properties that we want, right? And you know, if we want the system to have a particular security guarantee, and then like often there is a way to modify the proof of stake mechanism to also achieve it. So it's just you know, much more flexible, and it shows through in the efficiency and the security of the network.
When I hear this, when I hear Vitalik talking about this, what I hear is a guy who thinks that it is possible to achieve the same complex emergent behavior of system security. That is what security is. System security is a complex emergent behavior. He thinks that complex emergent behavior can be replicated using software, using a virtual reality, and he thinks it will have the same behavior as when people use real world physics, when people use real world watts to achieve security by imposing a severe physical cost on attackers. So it's beautiful because part of my theory on soft war and what I've been working on is this idea that people keep wanting to believe that you can create an abstract form of physical power that doesn't spend energy, that doesn't cause injury if it's kinetic. And using this abstract form of power, you can design systems that will have the same complex emergent behavior as physical power-based resource control hierarchies. And this is a belief that's been in society for 10,000 years, and it's demonstrably incorrect because we've never been able to escape from the necessity of having to use physical power to achieve the complex emergent behavior of system security for all of our resource control hierarchies. And so what I see is just the next generation of people to believe the same thing that people have tried and wanted to believe for 10,000 years. They think that using some form of syntactically and semantically complex language, you can, which is what software is, which is what a computer program is. They think that you can create an abstract form of power and then use that to establish control authority over people's resources, to determine the state of ownership and chain of custody of property, to settle disputes. People think that you can use an abstract form of power, which doesn't spend energy and which doesn't cause injury, and have the same systemic security properties as real world physical power that does use energy and that does cause injury. And that's fascinating because I can talk a lot about the history of people making the mistake of believing that abstract power will secure them, and apply it to this guy who very clearly, because of philosophy, because of ideologically beliefs, because of moral constructs, that energy expenditure is somehow bad. This is a guy that's trying to replace physical power-based resource control hierarchies with an abstract form of power using a semantically and syntactically complex language. Just like every rule of law that's ever been designed. And it's going to lead to the exact same emergent effect as every abstract power ever codified, whether it be codified using pen and parchment or whether it be codified using program and Python. We can expect it to have the same complex emergent properties, which is systemic oppression, exploitation, people demonstrably incapable of defending their access to their property and the policy they value because they are physically powerless to impose costs on that. It turns out, as we've learned time and time and time again for 10,000 years, Robert, that the best form of security, the best way to defend the access to the property you value, the best way to defend the policy against systemic exploitation, the best way to settle disputes, the best way, or at least the most secure way to settle disputes, the best way to achieve consensus on the legitimate state of ownership and chain of custody is through physical power. If it were possible to achieve the same level of systemic security using abstract power hierarchies instantiated in code or formally codified, then there would be no such thing as warfare, because we would have no need for physical power. And so here we are, like, this is it. This is, I think, the argument that breaks the back of proof of stake. And I think it's the argument that meets my need of showing why Bitcoin is the future of national strategic security.
Fantastic introduction. Obviously, we're toying with some big concepts and ideas here. So I'll try to share some perspectives on this to maybe bring it down to earth a little bit, hopefully. Not that that's easily done. So the problem here with proof of stake is that it simply does not ground out in physical reality, right? Yet it's like building a house with no foundation or something. It doesn't even make sense. You can't build a floating house, just like you can't control the real world with proof of stake, right? There has to be some physical connection.
Yeah,
So,
the problem is stake does not physically exist, Robert.
Exactly, right. Yes.
So,
it's an imaginal structure, right?
Yeah, software developers only recently started using object-oriented software design, where they describe the complex emergent behavior of a rule set as if it were an orientation of objects, because that's what humans are used to. We're used to living in a three-dimensional reality where objects are oriented around each other. So we arbitrarily choose to describe the complex emergent behavior of a rule set as if it were an object, but it is arbitrary, which means the name of it is arbitrary. Stake
Right.
does not physically exist because no software object physically exists. Software is just a set of rules that tell.
Just a language.
It's just an instruction that tells a discrete state machine what state to take. And we choose to describe the emergent behavior of those instructions as if it were an object, but it, of course, doesn't physically exist.
Right.
He understands this because he was flat out saying we can create a virtual universe. So they understand that abstract reality, virtual reality is this. Some people who just don't, like, you can learn you can learn how to program. Like, I learned how to program C++ years before I learned computer science. And the only thing I learned was object-oriented software design. I didn't have any other like tools in my toolkit to learn or how to think of software beyond it is just a set of objects. And we're getting to a point where people are legitimately believing that this abstraction called cloud or coin or stake is a physically real thing, which isn't. In Bitcoin, it doesn't matter because you're not trying to defend you're not trying to impose costs on people or who are trying to attack you with an abstract thing. You're imposing a physical cost on them with a real thing called real world watts.
Yes.
But when you use an abstract thing, stake does not exist, does not physically exist. The only place that stake exists is within our imagination.
Yes.
That means it's physically impossible to be decentralized, or at least verifiably. So you can't prove that it isn't already centralized, that most of it already doesn't belong to one group of people. But even if it did, you cannot expect that something that does not physically exist will have the same complex emergent behavior as something that does physically exist.